Some people talk and expect to be understood. Some people listen and learn. This isn't a story about success or motivation. It's a story about time, attention, and who truly deserves them. It begins with a man named Edward. Edward lived at the edge of a village, right where the green fields met the dusty road. His house was small, but his land was enough. Every single morning, he would carry a bucket of water and walk through his crops. He was meticulous. He'd check the leaves with his fingertips and test the soil with the heel of his boot. If something was wrong, he fixed it. If everything was right, he just moved on. He was a man of action, not words. One hot afternoon, a bus pulled up, stirring the dust on the road. A young man named Jake stepped off, carrying a single bag and wearing a look of exhaustion. He asked for Edward by name. The villagers just pointed toward the fields, their faces saying more than their voices. Jake found Edward exactly where they said he'd be, working in the field. Edward didn't even look up when Jake approached. So, Jake started talking. He talked about the city, about his failures, about all the grand plans that had fallen apart. He laid his entire life out there, hoping for some kind of response, some advice, anything. Edward just kept working, his hands moving with a steady, practiced rhythm. After what felt like an eternity, he finally stopped. He straightened up, looked at Jake for a brief moment, and then handed him a spade before walking away. Jake, a bit confused but desperate, followed him deeper into the field. He started digging, fast and shallow, trying to impress Edward with his energy. The soil broke unevenly, chunks flying everywhere. He quickly grew tired and stopped, complaining about how hard the ground was. Edward came over, took the spade from him, and demonstrated the technique. There were no words, just the smooth, efficient movement of his body. He dug one perfect line, then handed the spade back. Jake tried again. The result was still poor, a clumsy imitation of the master. Without reacting, Edward simply went over and straightened the crooked line Jake had made. Jake returned the next day, and the day after that. This became their routine. Some days, Edward was there in the field. Other days, he was gone. But the work was always there, waiting. On the days Edward was absent, Jake struggled alone, making mistake after mistake. When Edward finally appeared, he would silently correct the errors and then move on. He never explained why Jake was wrong or how to do it better. He just showed him. In the evenings, Jake would go to the village well, hoping for some validation. He'd tell the others how hard he was working, how much effort he was putting in. He craved their approval. The villagers would nod politely and then forget him the moment he walked away. They had their own work to do. Jake noticed a pattern with Edward. If he tried to talk while they worked, Edward would simply walk away to another part of the field. But if Jake stayed quiet, focused only on the task, Edward would stay close, a silent presence by his side. Slowly, over weeks that turned into a month, Jake learned. He learned when to stop talking. He learned when to just watch. His hands, once soft and clumsy, became calloused and steady. His rows in the field grew straighter, more uniform. As his work improved, Edward began leaving him alone for longer periods. The trust was unspoken, earned through action. One evening, a sudden, violent rainstorm swept through the valley, destroying a large section of the crop they had so carefully tended. Jake panicked. He ran to Edward's house, babbling about the damage, explaining every broken stalk and washed-out row in frantic detail. For the first time, Edward listened without interruption. When Jake finished, he simply walked out to the ruined section of the field and began the slow, arduous work of fixing it. Jake followed, and this time he worked without a single word. Together, in the fading light and the damp earth, they managed to control the damage. When it was done, Edward just went home. There was no praise, no good job. The shared work was enough. A few days later, a letter arrived for Jake from the city. He read it alone, standing at the edge of the field. It was a job offer, a second chance at the life he thought he had lost. He carefully folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. The next morning, he went to the field and worked with a focus he had never known before. Every movement was precise, every action deliberate. Edward noticed. He watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. On his final day, Jake packed his bag. He found Edward and waited, hoping for a farewell, a piece of wisdom, anything. But Edward remained silent. Instead, he reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small, simple gardening tool. It was worn smooth from countless years of use. He handed it to Jake. Jake understood immediately. It wasn't a gift. It was a signal, a passing of a torch, a nonverbal acknowledgement of a lesson learned. Jake left the village and returned to the city, but he was a different man. He spoke less, he watched more. He stopped trying to explain himself to people who weren't really listening. He just worked, and slowly, steadily, results followed. Some people noticed his new competence, others didn't. He found that he didn't really care either way. Back in the village, Edward remained. The fields stayed orderly. The roads stayed quiet. The work continued, day in and day out. From time to time, other people like Jake would arrive. Some would come and talk, full of their own stories and needs. A few would stay and watch and learn. And Edward, a man of the earth, gave his time and his attention only to those who understood that the most important lessons are the ones that are never explained. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more content that makes you think. We'll see you in the next one.